for tuning in on Yachting International Radio. You are listening to Maritime Unity, the podcast from the maritime community, where we talk with people from the entire maritime realm about safety and inclusion to discover what connects us. My name is Eva Lianne Veldkamp, and today we talk with Joan Feringa about the power of changing your mind. Hi, Joan.
Hi, Eva.
It's so nice to see you.
It's very nice to see you.
Yeah, and thank you for being on the show with us today. So before we start, can you please give us a quick introduction of who you are and what you love to do most?
Oh, that's what I love to do most. I started on the water with my father. I was a dad's girl, and he was a mechanic and had the world's best workshop where all the tools and everything had a system for finding their place. And when he was teaching me to drive and to boat and to tinker on the engines and so forth, I learned a lot, and that stayed with me into my teens. I became a sea cadet, which is a wonderful movement here in Canada, supported by the government, and I traveled a lot and learned a lot and became a leader there. I started a lot of the things that I've done in my life that I've loved most as one of the first women. I'm 62 years old today, and so over 40 years ago, I was one of the first women, one of the first girls as a sea cadet, and one of the first women on Coast Guard ships. I went to the Coast Guard College, and I was a navigator on Coast Guard vessels all over the coasts of Canada, and Canada has a very big coastline, including in the Arctic and both the east and west coasts. And, I always said that any of the ships may have been painted the same and the uniforms may have looked the same, but all the ships are completely different culture and all the people are completely different people. And that led me, I was a fly on the wall. Of course, I was different as a representation of diversity. You don't necessarily feel that day to day. You may be the only woman on board, and you knew that you were a new entity during those times, but you didn't live it as a difference.
Oh, you're just doing your thing, right?
You're trying. I loved the work. I think one of the things that I've said the most about my career is that I loved the work. What made it difficult was the life, and the life of it was really that it was different. The challenge was there. So having moved from ship to ship and place to place and experiencing a lot, I did a lot of it as we say, a fly on the wall. Watching the dynamics of the people, watching the hierarchy play itself out, seeing how people used regulatory processes and how we provided services, and when people were unhappy with things, what that meant. When I left the fleet and I was managing the fleet, I went ashore and I stayed with the Coast Guard for overall 25 years. And I ended up working in corporate services of all sorts. I worked in human resources, I worked in finance, I worked in program management, I worked in legal services. And through that time, I had started to take postgraduate training in all kinds of things that I thought could help. In many cases, I found it was really helpful if you came with the skill, but also the position, if that makes sense. You can be a marvelous chef, but you're not going to advise the cook on a ship what to do. And so having all these skills was a wonderful thing, but being able to find a way to apply them was oftentimes the bigger challenge. And what I probably learned to love the most was figuring out how I could take all the things that I love to do the most and make a difference with them. So
that's so cool.
So in 2000, I got my master's degree in conflict analysis and management. And one of the most profoundly cool things happened in my very first days in those academic halls. And that was that our professors, who were people who had advised presidents and governments and negotiations and mediations all around the globe, they asked this question, and the question was, where is the conflict? Oh, I'm a navigator who had all these skills. I'd built all these trays in my toolkit, trying to find ways of applying all these skills for good in the world. And suddenly, the thing that I'd started out with as a navigator was in my master's degree, which was all about helping people get along with each other. And all of a sudden, my very clear knowing how to get from here to here was called on to help figure out where we were when issues needed to be addressed. It all came together, and
that's cool.
And the summary of that is that I started a company called Conflict Navigator, and I teach leaders and teams and work with them, sometimes transformationally, sometimes to intervene. And I teach others to do that now in the same way that we have medical first aid, and mental health first aid is becoming a more global skill. Much of that started on battlefields. We don't have social first aid or relationship first aid, but we desperately need that. And so I started certified piloted conflict first aid in 2018, and I've been certifying, and I'm writing the book on that now. Full circle, I'm still navigating my own challenges and figuring out where I am and really bringing those skills to other people.
That's amazing. And it makes so much sense, because when you are navigating, you have to first know where you are yourself.
Exactly right.
To make a reference. And
that's
then
exactly right.
Yeah, so it makes a lot of sense. And I'm really looking forward to talk more with you about this. And I just want to put out there to anyone listening, if you have any questions to Joan, please leave them in the comments or contact us in any way if you would like to know something or you're curious about something. Because like you said, there's such a big need for everything that you touched upon. Social and relationship knowledge, emotional knowledge, conflict, resolutions, and just tools, right? Basic tools that people can use and understand and practice. It's really exciting to have you today.
Thank you so much. I'm very proud that I carry my navigation roots everywhere I go, for sure.
Yeah, I can understand. And I really love how you use that and also create a way of making sense of, because sometimes it can be hard to understand these things because they can be a little bit hard to understand in a non-storytelling way if you just explain the science, so to say. But if you can make a reference to, for example, navigating like you do, you can better understand where you're going. So I really love that you're doing that. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. What I wanted to talk about next is a LinkedIn post you made, I think, a couple of weeks ago. It was about the traditional Canadian Navy song, and it really triggered at least me. We will make sure to, or in a good way, I have to say. So we will just make sure that we leave the link to this post so everybody can read it if they want. But can you please explain a little bit what the post was about?
Sure. In my circles, the news that the Canadian Navy song, it's called Heart of Oak, was going to be replaced because it had gender references that were dated. Mm-hmm. And my initial reaction was, how dare they?
Yeah.
How could they? That's an amazing song. I literally could sing it for you now. It is like almost emblazoned on my heart. That song is, it's like an anthem for those who go to sea. It refers to both those who go to sea and the ships themselves as hearts of oak, the strength of that. And having initially thought that that should never be changed, somebody had in the thread that was discussing this with many people just protesting that this was an idea at all. And nobody was suggesting it was a good idea. There was nobody supporting it in the thread that I was reading through. Somebody had posted the lyrics. And the lyrics, I can sing them, but a lot of times when we sing something that we know so well, we don't hear them anymore.
Yeah.
It's, you know what I mean by an earworm? You know, like it's stuck with me. And I was singing that song for 30 minutes straight inside my head. Like the song was coming up. And then I went back and I read the lyrics again because I kept hearing it in my head. It was like so many in the first set of the lyrics. They had different stanzas. Like there was different parts of the song that none of us memorized. But even in the first one, there was at least 4 or 5 very clear references that left out women, left out any other, very much traditional men, traditional naval kinds of lyric. And in Canada, we have changed those words in our national anthem to be more inclusive. We say all of us and that kind of thing. It's more open now.
Yeah.
And we're all accustomed to it now. It's more, if you raise it with people, they're like, oh yeah, I never remember to say them. But nobody protests it, that the change got made to what was our traditional national anthem.
So before it was like all of men and now it was all of us, something like that?
Something like that.
Oh, okay, okay. Makes sense then to change it.
A simple change, and it includes all of us. And of course, mankind, we can get ourselves around that. But anyway, the other part of it for Canadians is that the lyric was actually a British originated song. So the way that it landed on me, however, after listening to that length of time in my ears and hearing that, was that I thought, if I was a young person today, and not just women, and was being taught the lyric, it might land on me that I'm excluded or included in a way that it didn't 40 or 50 years ago when I was first starting and learning the lyrics to that.
Yeah.
And that's a little bit of a factor. But the more important thing, frankly, was that I realized that nobody was standing up and saying, you know what? It's a change that would support that we do want to change the makeup of the communities that are in the Navy. We do recognize that there are others. And maybe we should look at that. And maybe there is a way of doing this. How do we keep the tradition and the beauty of that song and what we love most about it and find a way of incorporating that with the new? But nobody was saying that. Everybody was just saying it's horrifying that women who are complaining are ridiculous. And those who think this is, categorize them as woke these.
So
and you know
just
what made, just let me just summarize it to say this. The things that made the most difference for me when I was living my life on platforms offshore and in boardrooms where I was the only woman years after that. I was now working in the offices, and everybody in these floors of those who had been there for decades. What made the difference was when somebody just leaned over to me and said, you know what, it matters that you're here. It's the micro supports. It's not always just microaggressions. It's not like we live our lives and the little microaggressions cut at us. I didn't have any sense in hearing that song was going to be changed, that there was anything out there in looking for themselves to model micro support for the women who are there. And micro support for the women who have represented that change. I met one of the first women who was in one of these organizations this past year, and I went up to her and I literally bought her flowers. That woman deserved her flowers for having suffered through what it was like to be the first one. And it was just a little micro thing that I could do to say, I see you there. And nobody was saying that they saw us there. So I really felt that I had changed in how I saw the meaning of the gesture of changing the lyric to something that was more inclusive. The gesture is far more important than even if ultimately they don't change it. It would mean it doesn't really matter. If there was this huge wave of support and ultimately everyone, it's no big deal. Just leave it how it is because it's traditional. I would love that.
Yeah.
But saying that it matters is what matters.
Yes, it's the talk itself, right? I think this is such a good example of the big worth and value of these discussions and of talking about this. And I can understand that sometimes you can notice that people have irritation or frustration about wokeness or about talking about inclusion, and you hear it again and we get tired of hearing it, and what was wrong with the old ways, and you should just shut up, or I don't know. But like you said, it's so good to understand it's not even about the song or the flag or the colors or the whatever. It's about the talk that we have together to make sure that we connect over things that we can agree with and things that we don't agree with, maybe. And then also changing your mind about it, perhaps. So just to a little bit, because I think there's so much value in what you said. So what exactly was it that made you change your mind? Because you dearly love the tradition, and and also you really, what I could hear is that you really felt connection to it, not to the lyrics, but to the feeling that the song gave you.
Oh, immensely.
Yeah, and then, so what was it that no other people stood up for each other that changed your mind about, hey, let's talk about this? Or can you say what it was more specifically?
I think it was cumulative. It was all of those things, all of the years of experience that I'd had where I didn't have micro support. Mm-hmm. I had in so many circumstances had something that needed change affect me or somebody like me. Mm-hmm. And there wouldn't be a voice in the darkness to say, wait a minute, even though we're not changing it right now, you still matter.
Yeah.
Which should go without saying, because of course we are seeing women joining the ranks of the Navy. But I think the thing that struck me most was that we are not seeing, in the duration of time that I have been part of those organizations, we haven't seen the numbers markedly increase.
Yeah.
So my days were 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And yet the numbers are still abysmal, really. We have one Coast Guard fleet that up until at least the last time I spoke to, the one woman who was in the whole region of 6 ships. There was one woman, and she'd actually stuck it out and was a captain. But there was no other crew. There wasn't a single other woman in the fleet with her.
Yeah.
And I know that there are many fleets out there and parts of the world where even where there had been some representation, because it's so difficult and discouraged and they're not seeing those micro supports all over the place, the living of it. So they love the work. They want to do the work, but the living through it doesn't feel safe. And that safety isn't even something that you feel day to day. I can't say there was a time that I feared for my life. I can't say there was a time that I feared for my job, that I feared for that. But did I feel safe?
Yeah.
Did I feel support?
Yeah. No. Yeah, so I think what you're saying is that it shows so much about the system that you're using and the system that should support every person in it, but now mostly supports males in it and just doesn't even recognize that there's other
and I did too.
Male.
When I was out there.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
You end up coming in and you join the culture and you live the culture and you find that you're not safe for other women either. Yeah. I was, in some cases, worse to other women than the men were because they made it more difficult for me. More women bringing in their challenges represented a bigger challenge for me.
Yeah.
It's that the nature of being supported in ways that are often these micro doses of support for reasons that are peripheral, for reasons that aren't necessarily direct. You don't want to be coddled. You want to go in, you want to do the job, you want to do the work, but you want to see everywhere around you that sense that you belong. And that sense of belonging is like a fundamental human need that we have that's not easy for us to fill for ourselves. Yeah, definitely. Oh, this is so good that you said it like this, because that's exactly like what is the feeling behind some certain belief systems that can be, I'm struggling to find the English word for it, hurtful for yourself and for others sometimes. If you believe deep inside, and you cannot even find this in your own brain sometimes, you have to discover it like layer by layer. But if you feel like you don't belong, you make up all kinds of belief systems to make sure that you survive in the environment that you're in. So it makes so much sense. And also that you said that you're done unsafe for other women as a woman, that's also very recognizable, because then you just have to survive in the system you are trying so hard to adapt yourself into. And what I also really liked about what you said about the micro support is that I think it's not micro at all. It's just very overhead, if you say it like that. So you are like basically supporting all of it by just a small thing, like talking together about a song can be so supportive in many ways. And very inclusive, because the song is for everyone.
like everyone with ears and with the ability to hear or listen can talk about this then. So I also very much like that. Yeah, so thank you. This is such a cool conversation.
It's a pleasure to have it. I think we live it so much, and like I said, you don't necessarily experience it as you're going through because you love it. You love that you're surrounded by what has been, how it was, and how it was great. I joined it voluntarily. I adored being there. The ability to be challenged in every way as the representative of diversity, it was part of the wonders of just being alive and finding success in whatever your groove was.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, that it can take all these other little experiences that are like a wave underneath. Yeah. There are currents that somehow are constantly dragging you down, and it's just one little thing that can disrupt it, and then you don't know where to go because those supports haven't shown themselves. And that's, I guess, now as an ally and someone who wants to bring, this comfort level, that there can be support without this drastic sense of change and without this seeing themselves as bad or seeing the history and legacy as being bad, that we can love both at the same time. And exactly how to do that is situational and circumstantial and personal for many people. But if we're not, like you say, having the dialogues, then it doesn't show up for the people who need to hear it. And I have so many stories where the very dramatic turn was the other way, because I get a very clear message that I was different and not necessarily bad, but just different, and that I was the challenge.
Yeah, that happens then. Yeah, this is a nice bridge to what I would really like to talk about next. And that's, so in your post, you call it the conflict tsunami.
Yeah.
So what you just touched upon briefly, I think, is what might create, am I right in this, that this uncomfort and this uncomfortable feeling not stable, and feeling that you have to let go of certain beliefs or things that you always thought that was present or should be like this. Is that a basic thing that happens in conflicts, or how do you see that?
Yes. I think the nature of conflict always puts us in a situation where we wish we could be magical wizards with a wand or like pixie dust or something that can just fix it and make everybody okay, or make the problem go away. And a lot of times it's far more complex. The simple fix doesn't get to that rising tide of dismay or disgust or disrespect or disregard. And I think really the disregard that I felt in initially finding out about the song is a perfect example of that. And all of the posts, all the comments on it that said, that's ridiculous and it's horrible, and why would they even consider that?
Yeah.
It's like this wave of like, I can't argue that. And yet, so in so much of our lives, that's really where we have the distress and the difficulty. We call it difficult conversations. And in many cases, they say start with common ground. And yet the thing that we're arguing is common ground. Wait a minute. We're all in the same workplace. We're all humans. We're all lovers of the tradition. We're all that kind of thing. And yet all of those things end up becoming cumulative parts of what makes it feel unsafe for us. And all of the regulation in the world can't necessarily change how somebody feels with regard to their safety. And you can actually touch on any one of the dominoes that make you even realize that there's a problem to fix. And to be the one to say, it's this domino. That's that one. It's that one. That I want to talk about. The safety for doing that and saying, it isn't so much the song that's the problem. It isn't so much this that's the problem. It's that none of you people have ever said a good word about me. That's not what I'm saying at all. So it ends up that tsunami of potential for conflict gets in the way of solving the actual issue. And so often it goes both ways. Yeah. That's something that could be so simple becomes very complex. Yeah. And something that's very complex can be very simple. Yeah. That's so interesting to think about. And I'm not sure my mind can handle it right now. The most important piece of it really is that we try to regulate a lot of... So somebody has to make a decision about the song. Yeah. And they've already made decisions that they want diversity to become a hallmark, cornerstone of what the strength of the organization is going to be. They're having terrible times with recruiting. Yeah. So how can we make it safer for the diverse peoples that we're wanting to recruit in an organization that's already decided, that's already regulated, that we will accept, and we need to find a way of making this safe for people who bring in their differences. Our differences can be very complex, but that's a very simple decision. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So when it comes to an individual's comfort with something, or the simplicity, the very easy thing of saying, it matters that the words aren't really aren't modern. And it matters that the tradition is still revered and respected. But the individual sense of I'm not being respected here can make them feel unsafe. Yeah. And that's a simple thing to be able to say, I don't feel safe here. Then what do you do about it? Is it the issue of the whole song? No, it's not. That's not what makes somebody feel unsafe. What made them feel unsafe is that we weren't able to look at what they were experiencing and have it. That's another discussion to be had. There's a really beautiful way of defining a very common word that I think is helpful here. The word is respect. Now, some of us believe that you have to earn respect. Everybody's on the same plane and you earn respect. And others respect people from the hop, and then people lose respect. We have this sort of difference about what respect can mean. We know we're supposed to respect our elders and our supervisors and so forth. But I toss out all of those as the definitions of respect. And I see it as this way. The root word in respect is spectacles, looking at things. Yeah. How you look at things. And if you are a very capable conflict manager as a human, parent, colleague, peer, manager, boss, if you have capacity to do that, then what you recognize when somebody says, I don't feel safe, is that you have an opportunity to relook at what they're saying, because they may actually have it quite wrong, or the other person may have heard it wrong. They're protecting this song, they're protecting this tradition. And meanwhile, the person isn't saying, it's not the song, it's not their tradition. But if you don't give them the time so that they can look at themselves and re-look at it from that perspective. It's such a simple concept to re-look at those who are saying, I'm being disrespectful to you because I don't feel like I've been seen here. You're not actually hearing where I am. So if we re-look at things when there seems to be that, you're not respecting the decision to change the song. You're not respecting the whole of the legacy here. What is it really that's saying that's not working? That's a good question.
It's really a good question. And also, I really love your view of how you would define respect. And to me, as a non-native English person, I really had to think about perspective. Not respect, but perspective, right? And also how you know it from your inside voice, maybe even. So how your inner being, like inside of your heart, can feel or be with what you observe that another person is observing. I think this is just a basic human ability, right? To have empathy like that.
When you asked the question about what it was in the song that really had gotten me, what made it change for me, it absolutely was that I re-looked at myself. I really heard myself in that. And I saw myself as not just the 14-year-old marching along the parade square and saluting at the right time whilst singing the song. I also saw myself as a woman who was frustrated that there weren't 30% of the maritime community that's diverse today after 50 years. I'm also that person who does see the need for us to have a discussion about that song.
Yeah, that's so nice. So thank you, Joan. It's just so good to talk about these things. And to all of the listeners, I would really encourage everyone listening to just think about this a little bit and think about how you see it. And then if you want to leave a comment or have a question, please do. So thank you, Joan, for being here with us today. Before we end, I want to ask you a question, and I'm asking this to all the guests on my show. Because I'm making these podcasts here in Yachting International Radio, because my biggest wish is for us all to see and recognize the human kindness within ourselves and also in the other. So my question to you is, what makes you feel human and in connection with humankind?
That is such a big question.
It's a really big question.
It's a really big. I think you and I need to get together for several bottles of wine.
Really totally do that. Yeah,
you can totally do that. I think
that's a good answer.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think I've answered it in many ways. That I think the thing that connects me with even myself is to respect that. I think curiosity is part of that. It helps to be curious and to know that questions help. And it's so much a part of what a good manager and coach and conflict specialist, podcast interviewer can do, to have the curiosity about yourself and change and what makes things work for people. And I think that we make so many assumptions that we wish were simple decisions, but so often we know we're more complex than that. And respecting that, I think being able to continually take off our glasses and have another look, step back and have another look, and go really deep and have another look. And I think that's what we were able to do today, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it as well. Thank you for being here again. And also thanks to all the listeners today. I hope you learned a little bit more about inclusion and safety, and feel free to share if you did. So for now, I want to say tot ziens and see you in the next episode.